Welcome back to All About Apps. It's the time to wrap up for 2024. Not quite like Spotify, maybe not the cool moves and the grooves and the sounds, but we have very cool guests indeed because we're diving into trends, challenges, breakthroughs, everything that defined ad tech in 2024. And of course, because we have the experts, we can look around the corner, we can see into what's next in 2025. Yes, indeed. It's been a whirlwind year, rising UA costs. We know about that. But we also saw the excitement around creative innovation reshaping every app vertical. And that's why we're looking to different app verticals. We usually, yes, indeed, we all look at gaming. They are the pioneer performance marketers, but we're also going to look at the very exciting and vibrant area of e-commerce. But of course, looking back is only useful if it helps us look forward. So you need people who can do that, and we have that. We have three experts who do that as their day job, you could say. So I want to start by welcoming Sue Azari, e-commerce industry consultant at AppsFlyer. As I said, your day job, you are the go-to expert for scaling success, recognized in mobile app dailies 40 under 40, crowned a top voice for retail on LinkedIn. So you have made your mark navigating loyalty strategies, remarketing strategies, making sense of the chaotic and shifting landscape. So I say we have exactly the right person, and we're lucky to have you.
Thank you so much. That was the kindest intro. So thank you. I'm so glad to be here with this great panel of experts as well. So I'm looking forward to sharing some insights from this year.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing them, Sue. I didn't know about you before. That's my fault. But now that I do, I'm a fan. So I want to hear about that because if someone is seeing big shifts in 2024 and overall in the industry, it's you. And another area that's moving at the speed of change is, of course, retail. That's where our next guest takes the spotlight. Rudransh Dobhal, lead of performance marketing and growth e-commerce at Eyewa, which is the region's largest and fastest growing eyewear retailer, excels at driving high impact campaigns. And you excel at scaling business across international markets. We'll talk about how you did that because it was a standout year for Eyewa. I guess you're still celebrating there because one thing you did, in addition to your impressive omni-channel strategies, you also raised $100 million in Series C funding. So congratulations on both counts. And as I said, we're lucky to have you, and particularly because you've had such an amazing year when many haven't. So we have a lot to learn. Good to have you here.
Thank you so much, Peggy. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be among such esteemed guests, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
And also, what a good year for you! What a great year! I wonder if you're still celebrating in the office.
You couldn't have asked for more. End of the year, we're already in the celebration mode, and yeah, we're off to a great start ahead. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'll be watching you because that is impressive. And moving on, we have, of course, my co-host, expert at making ad tech work smarter, not harder, which is what we really want in the year ahead. Faheem Saiyad, director at App Samurai, and whether it's tackling programmatic advertising, leveraging connected TV, you have been there, done that, and you're helping brands in 2025, of course, but a long track record also going back and seeing the shifts in 2024. So great to have you.
Thank you, Peggy. It's a pleasure to be here with Sue and Rudransh as well. I believe we have a good agenda moving forward, so I'm quite excited for this one.
Yes, you are in your element, Fahim. That is why we have you here. Not only because you're my co-host and I love working with you, but no, you know what you're doing. So let's get started and talk about the year in review. I mean, it was a year, right? Quite a year for ad tech. Transformative change. We're talking about AI reshaping campaign creativity, the rise of CTV as truly a cost-effective UA channel, and of course, regulatory scrutiny on the rise if you think about things like the antitrust trial against Google, shaking up digital. So I'll start with you, Sue. You're watching these trends. This is in your DNA. What do you think were the game changers for app marketers this year?
I think for app marketers, particularly within, I'll focus on the e-commerce vertical. I think because of those changes that are affecting a lot of the advertising networks. And then there are various changes in terms of new entrants to the market. So later on, I'll talk a bit about Temu and Shein, who've actually absolutely exploded from a growth perspective. And they were one of the top downloaded apps in most, particularly Western Europe countries this year in 2024. I've definitely seen more diversification of media channels when it comes to UA and retargeting. So particularly within e-commerce, they've come people have come from a web-based background. They're used to working with the likes of Meta and Google only, and now I'm seeing more investment in the likes of TikTok, Reddit, Pinterest, more demand side platforms as well. I'm really learning from gaming apps who are so strong in that space. So I love seeing more e-commerce app marketers really get their hands dirty and actually look at the amazing wealth of networks that there are to work with within the mobile marketing space. Alongside that, because of economic and inflation pressures that have reduced consumers' disposable incomes within the market, consumers now are way less loyal than they used to be. And there's been a bigger focus for app marketers on loyalty, so optimizing campaigns towards LTV, creating loyalty programs. We work with JD Sports, for instance, who are a huge online retailer, and they just recently launched a new loyalty app. That is just focused on, you can get cash back on purchases in store, but it's very app centric in the way that it works, which is fantastic. I love seeing mobile being integrated more within this omni-channel environment, which is fantastic. So a lot of QR codes placed within stores and trying to drive users offline back into the app. And then really we've seen this huge growth in owned media as well, for retargeting. So because there's been a little bit of pull back on some paid media budgets, a lot of app marketers within e-commerce are focusing on email, more on push, SMS, referral campaigns as well. And again, particularly with that retargeting strategy to try and bring more users back to the app.
Well, it is good that it's all app focused if you think about, because that's what you have when you are shopping. So that loyalty connection with the app, that makes a lot of sense. And loyalty strategies, it's not just about getting the audience's attention and having that strategy, but in areas like yours, for example, Rudraj, so it is about diversifying channels. There's a focus on the audience, there's a focus on loyalty. That certainly reshaped 2024. But success isn't about the strategy. It's good that the marketers are following that, but it also depends on the market where they are. And when I look at yours, for example, for Iowa, MENA is a fast moving region, experiencing massive growth, looking at just your own company, but the region itself, I've done a lot of work on this and been there, and it's very hyper personalized. There are digital savvy consumers. They demand a lot. So, what did you observe about the trends, the dynamics in ad tech spending overall there? Because it's very different.
Absolutely. So in particularly in the MENA region, in terms of spending, you must have seen that uh, companies around the globe, debarring MENA, I think have spent a much less budget. But MENA, we have actually pushed our budget to a median of 20 to 40%. Uh, Iowa personally pushed our marketing budget to 20%, and we saw incremental results as well. In terms of what kind of change I see that generative AI, especially, has been on the boom. We have
Hmm.
personally ingested it in our app, in our experiences, so that our customers, whenever they interact with our app, they feel that they have a personalized experience. They have a more inclusive experience, where they feel like the app is offering something that is tailored value, right? Uh, it is something that is specifically for them. So these are the top two trends that I've noticed. Uh, in terms of talking about how other companies inculcated it, I think Kareem, as an example, in peak hours, I used to notice when I was in UAE, they used to just send personalized offers and notifications. Just analyzing a user's behavior and how they interact in the LTV journey, right? So
Hmm.
these are some things that I've noticed in terms of spending. And but if you talk about what would be the top change I noticed, I think we can't miss generative AI. It has been the number one change that I feel in the marketing field, and not only the marketing field, but any field for that matter.
That's fascinating. It's helping make marketing more effective. But when I think about what you're saying, Rajaj, about how people want a tailored experience, being that equivalent of one-to-one marketing, that is something where you also need the inspiration, the creativity, and the support of AI there as well. So you're probably seeing it on two levels.
Exactly. On uh, uh, apart from this, just it's also making our jobs as marketers easier. We can analyze data better. We can segregate it better. We can segment the audience. We can target them. So it's also making our lives better, and therefore, like, we see an increase in conversion rate, engagement, etc. As an example, our install rate, got up by about 7%, which was like, because our install rate is still very high, especially in iOS, but it got up by 7%. So that was a huge bump for us.
Well,
I can't solely, credit it to just generative AI, but yeah, it had to, it had a huge part to it.
that's interesting, Rudransh. I mean, we're seeing Mina's unique dynamics. It's very different, of course, Fahim, where you are, because you're looking at markets like US, UK, also global, of course, but you've seen trends play out differently there. Maybe not so much a focus on hyper personalization, maybe looking at something else. So, what are the trends that stand out for you in 2024?
So one thing that was certain, as mentioned, Peggy, same thing with Sue, as you both mentioned, that with the SK ad network and the privacy-friendly tracking that has been kind of solidified in the past year, to be honest, especially in the tier one markets, the way the advertisers have responded is by collaborating actively to kind of have more of an aggregated data approach rather than individual tracking. So back in the day, you used to run a UA campaign, used to
Hmm.
acquire users, and was more of a mass generic campaign, a generic approach at viewing data as well. But in 2024, we have seen a huge shift where the UA teams started to collaborate deeply with the lifecycle marketing teams. A lot of these big legacy brands, especially in the US, started implementing lifecycle marketing teams, investing into CRM tools. The idea being it's always easier to acquire a user, but it's not exactly easy to retain them, right? So it's difficult, it's more expensive to acquire a user rather than to keep the same user for longer into the funnel as well. Hence, retention has been something a lot of the clients have shifted focus to as well, because with the traditional channels that did come in with these privacy friendly regulations, the UA cost significantly went up, the eCPMs shot up. So now basically you are acquiring less users for the same budget, and there is a high chance that that user might not let you track them. And once this comes into your life, all your push notifications, those personalized offers basically go off the window, because if the user doesn't want to get tracked, you are left with a limited set of data. So this is where
Hmm.
we have seen a big shift where the UA and the retention teams have come together as one, because the idea was we have this set of data. Now, how can this data be leveraged? Let's, even if you want to use a layer of AI, let's say you want to have a very niche custom creative, as Rudransh mentioned, right? This could be in terms of a certain language, a certain demographic, but the idea of having something personalized without data is always difficult, right? That's where we have seen a different kind of aspects where the human touch is still needed to fit, to kind of push the AI layer out with custom creatives. A lot of these custom short video story kind of formats have been very much active, because the users have, us being the users, our attention span has gone down significantly. So these creatives need to have this storytelling. So usually when you are a startup, right, you have your elevator pitch. How would you pitch your business to an investor within 20 seconds, right? So that's the approach of these short content these days that we see out on LinkedIn actively. So the TikTok format is very much active on LinkedIn as well, right? Because whether
Hmm.
you are trying to get the attention of a business or a user, the short format of video storytelling has been massive. And that is something that marketers are trying to combine with the personalized data, because they have a couple of hiccups along the way. So when you merge all of this together, you have a new UA and retention strategy, where we see the marketers shifting focus with 2024 and in the next phase of 2025 as well.
Absolutely. Because of the focus on life cycle marketing, because you want to get users and keep them, obviously that impacts how you acquire users in the first place. So I want to shift gears to exactly that, to UA, because the strategies have evolved. It used to be, it was happy days actually, when it was just, yes, I want to have a user, keep a user. If the retention curve isn't longer than 14 days, I have still monetized. I'm still in a good place. Those days are long gone, not just in 2024, but we're seeing a shift to a new type of focus on profitability. So you focus on sustainable growth. And you've said this a lot as well, Sue, because I was looking in LinkedIn. But what does sustainable growth look like in practice? You're working with companies. How are you helping them balance, the short-term wins and that little adrenaline high with the idea that, yes, sometimes cheap is expensive.
I think that there's sometimes a bit of education on, not just looking at those upper funnel metrics. And yeah, I've worked with a lot of brands who sometimes
Mm,
they've just focused on CPI or even volume of installs, and that doesn't help with profitability. So really trying to educate them on the right types of metrics to be looking at. We're seeing many more businesses focus on incrementality, so looking at uplift
yeah,
tests when they are testing new networks and new audience types. And definitely, there's more scrutiny, I would say, from the C-suite level within businesses towards that marketers on yeah, profitability and incremental value when it comes to looking at ROI or ROAS. A much bigger shift, as I said before, towards lifetime value optimization. And then, as Faheem was saying before, it was a really good point around the rise in CPMs and CPAs. To go back to my point about Timo, what I've had a lot of in the market and where it's impacted user acquisition, they spent reportedly $2 billion on Meta alone in the US last year. And a lot of ecom brands that I've spoken to have said that they've really seen that impact, that their CPMs and CPAs across that media network, amongst some others. So that's where, again, to go back to my earlier point, it's trying to educate them on the other channels that are available and how they can diversify that spend in other places across both paid and owned media. And then alongside this, I think Fahim also said this, alongside that, and then we've got like signal loss,
mm,
privacy changes. Creative has become such an important lever for growth and optimization. And it's something that I think the gaming vertical has really excelled at and has been fantastic at, and really trying to take the learnings from that vertical into the world of e-commerce in terms of iterative testing, ensure that they're doing format first creatives. I've seen lots of examples where they might take a campaign that's worked well on Meta and then they just try and put it onto TikTok, and they're not thinking about, okay, what works well for that channel
mm.
specifically. So really just a lot of education in the market, but things I've seen some real success with the businesses that have really nailed those core fundamentals, and that's had a huge impact on their UA campaigns.
Hmm. So truly, we are tailoring our metrics. We're tailoring our creatives to the audience as well. You mentioned a shift in metrics. I'm hearing a lot about people looking at revenue per retained user now as a North Star metric. I don't know what you're hearing or advising your your clients for 2025, but it's interesting. It's a shift, definitely.
I think that the biggest metrics that we're seeing are it is lifetime value, or they are looking at margin as well. So starting to look more at margins. And then they're thinking a little bit more carefully about margins per products that are shown in, say, like dynamic product ads on Meta, for instance, looking a little bit more closely at the product feeds and what types of products have a higher margin, not just showing products that might have, with sales, for instance, of the 70% off, and there's typically a lower margin on those products. They might not put paid spend behind those types of campaigns. So they're starting to think a little bit more strategically. To your point, I think everything now is coming back to, yeah, profitability.
Profitability and experience. We talk about experiential advertising, which brings me back to Mina and you, Rudransh, because we have there, um, it's very different. It's focused on making the experience memorable, but actually retention is more about making it magnetic, the attraction and keeping it and making it lasting, that lasting impression. What are marketers relying on to make that experience lasting?
So I already talked about personalization. I think
Mm,
one more thing that engages users and have that magnetic effect, I think, is gamification in the application themselves. For as an example, if you go to the Eyewa app, you open it up. If you want to perhaps try a sunglass or an eyeglass, you can use an AI-based AR lens where it analyzes your face shape and recommends
cool.
you products accordingly. So you can actually firsthand see how you might look like when you try buy that product, and that seems to increase the conversion rate. So I think this is the number one thing that we have done in terms of like having people to play with the app, and not just play around like mindlessly, at least like provide them with value, the value being the product and what product would fit their face, right? I see many companies doing the same. For example, if we advertise on Snapchat, especially in KSA, which is a huge channel by the way in KSA, there's nothing like it. No counterpart to Snapchat. You might say Google, but Snapchat is number one in KSA. So in for advertisers like us who sell e-com products that usually are an accessory. Snapchat offers an AR lens where, of course, you can try the product while you see that ad yourself. So that is very interesting. So not only us, I think advertising platforms themselves have inculcated a gamification in their experience so that the user is more indulged in their application themselves. So yeah, I think these are the top two things that I've noticed.
Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting point about Snapchat there because, yes, we think about acquisition, the channel, and the performance. But actually, in your case, we're talking very much about what is the experience. And that is such an interesting and effective complement to commerce. It is literally try and then buy.
Exactly. Try and buy. If the customer does not exit the funnel, the cost of retention, subsequently
Mhm.
goes down. So I think, gamification, becomes a lot more important. I'm aware of the fact that a lot more companies cannot do it because of the product line that they offer, but an element of like just engaging the customer goes a long way.
Mhm. So the thread we're hearing here is it's experimentation, it's experience, and whether it's finding new ways to retarget, remarket, it's all about elevating retention through exciting experiences, compelling experiences, things that keep you coming back. What are you seeing, Faheem? Where are you seeing experimentation? And more importantly, where are you seeing the results?
Yeah, so one thing that I think both Sue and Rudhansh touched on was the way profitability is defined in, let's say, board meetings these days. Is, back in the day, everybody used to ask, hey, what does your CPI look like? These days, the talk of the town is, hey, what does your retention rate? What does your LTV look like? And this is a shift that we have seen actively, even in customer calls, QBRs. As a tech provider, usually the customers are more focused on not how many installs were acquired, rather, what does the LTV or the retention rate of the users looks like as well. Now, back in the day, of course, when you had a lot of data to play with, it was a bit of an easier scope to, hey, the optimization will be done on an XYZ data set. But these days, you have to kind of rely on the client to come up with an innovative strategy where even first-party data could be leveraged. For example, as Rudransh and Sue again mentioned, that gamification is something that is much of innovation these days. For example, AliExpress, that is owned by Alibaba, the biggest e-commerce in Southeast Asia, they have mini games inside their own e-commerce app. A leading brand in Turkey recently introduced the gaming section as a small placement within their own e-commerce app. The idea being, let the user come to my app even if they don't plan to shop, right? With the
Yeah.
idea being, as they play games, the engagement increases, the retention rate, the brand loyalty, it all kind of plays back to it. And there's also a new aspect of where you are using these micro influencers within your in-app community. So your app has a community. Within this, you use micro influencers to conduct a small little survey. Maybe you have your own loyalty platform. Basically, these are the kind of trends we have seen the kind of marketers move towards, to to make sure that the users actually feel comfortable with the data they have passed, and yet they are seeing these personalized offerings. In terms of the experimentation with emerging channels, one thing that we have seen very actively is in-game advertising. Recently, a startup in the MENA region, I think they raised over $6 million in pre-seed. The idea being their SDK would enable in-game advertising, but for e-commerce brands. So imagine you're playing a game. As you are racing through the game, there is a billboard within the game where you see a
Mm.
certain placement of Iowa, for example, where you can click and continue shopping. So that is the kind of dynamic scenario, because a lot of the users, as Sue mentioned, are moving towards the gaming side of things as well. Along with this, we have seen a lot of contextual placements within streaming apps. So, streaming services like Twitch have their own massive ad tech ecosystem now. So where they have, because you see a person gaming, on top of that, this person has a big fan base which actively trust them. So these are influences within the gaming realm, and these kind of ad placements have also driven high user engagement. The volume might not be as high as the programmatic DSP, but to see that, in a world of AI where things are moving so fast, games are being deployed so quick, that you could have a new channel where you could use CTV, OTT, and
Mm.
streaming within games as a placement for user acquisition and retention efforts. That is something very, very interesting to see in the markets, MENA or Tier 1 US and UK as well.
And it's the mix of those channels. I mean, you make the point that maybe not they don't really maybe deliver the volume, but it's not a volume game right now. It's a value game. So these matter. Everything matters, and all of these different approaches matter. And so what happens is we look at marketing effectiveness differently. It's not about moving the needle, it's about moving the audience. So that is where the creatives come in. And you've both, actually all three have mentioned that, because that is a mega trend. At the very least, you're using ad creatives to help segment the customers, because you don't know who they are. So you throw out the creatives and see what response you get. And then you have an understanding of the audience. Or it's a narrative, it's a storytelling approach. So ads are content. That's interesting. So let's talk about that. Ad formats, storytelling approaches that you saw really make an impact, a real impact in 2024. And keeping that in mind, what are the creative trends app marketers should be watching most in the year ahead? So I'll start with you, Sue, because you have a very broad approach to this. I mean, you're dealing with major brands, so they can't tell just any story. They're a little bit, there's a brand consistency and brand safety level there as well. So what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think first of all on the storytelling piece, it's about storytelling with purpose, and I think now, particularly with Gen Z, they're increasingly drawn to brands that do have a strong sense of purpose, and things like sustainability and company values are really starting to impact the consumer decision making process. So marketers are starting to lean more into storytelling that aligns with social causes or sustainability efforts, which resonate with a more values driven audience.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I would say is that I see in e-commerce a bit of a barrier when it comes to creative optimization is resource to deliver new creatives at
Mm-hmm.
pace, multiple iterations, and to fill all the formats that are available within the different platforms. Ways that brands are getting around this, and where it's also really impactful as a strategy, is UGC content. And they can rely on it can be customer reviews or testimonials, social media content, or could be influencer content. There's a great app, the part of Stradivarius, part of Inditex Group, who own like Stradivarius and Zara. So they're called Pull and Bear, and they've created within the app. It's very much been social influence, very TikTok style in terms of its video formats that you can swipe through and you can shop the looks, but they're using influencers and influencer content to actually fill that content within the app, and then they're also pushing that out from a paid media perspective. And that means they don't have to go through a creative team and go through the backlog internally. So it's a win-win in the sense of obviously UGC content works really well within e-commerce, but also it helps with that roadblock that sometimes they can experience internally with processes to actually fulfill those creative requirements.
Hmm. And again, when you make the point that it's about, sort of sustainability in a story, authenticity is part of that. So UGC, real people
Yeah.
producing real content that's relevant and interesting and compelling, that all works together. What does it look like in Mina, Rudransh? What is the idea there? Where's the creativity? What's standing out for you? What was a standout in 2024? And what are you watching most closely in 2025?
Uh, the top trend that I noticed in terms of creators was unpolished content and hyper localization.
Hmm.
Uh, as an example,
Ah.
expanding to Sue's point about where creatives like the resource and scaling them, and taking they creating the creative itself becomes difficult. Uh, we actually onboarded a partner which produce content, AI persona based content, which might seem like a person, like a regular person talking, not a celebrity, and talking about our product with a localized accent in Arabic. uh, of course, since the Middle East market is so vast, the dialect of the Arabic changes as well. So the persona takes up the AI, because it's AI. You just have to feed in the data, and it takes up the dialect itself. So they talk about the product as if they've used the product. They talk about how it helps them, etc., how it makes them change their look, etc., right? So
Mm-hmm.
the problem of scaling large contents has also been somewhat solved with the help of AI. And when we ran these ads, we saw that not only people resonated with them because they were unpolished ads, it was like something that came up on your feed while you were scrolling on. It didn't seem like an ad, like people convert to that. So that was something that I noticed was, a lot of partners, using that as well. So yeah, I think UGC, and a UGC with a more unpolished approach, a very natural approach,
Hmm.
would be the top thing for me this year.
Okay. Natural, authentic, real. I'm hearing this as a thread here. Coming to you, Fahim, you look at it again globally, you see it differently, and you work with different clients, customers in the space. What are you seeing as standout 2024, and what is really exciting you for 2025?
Adding on to what both Sue and Rudan said, right? The short format of videos, it's basically banners, interstitials. They're still a thing, but they're basically a thing of the past. The Gen Z, the young crowd that is actually going to spend the money in, is coming from these short video formats. You can call it the TikTok format, you can call it the Instagram format. The
Yeah.
idea of seeing something and within the first 3 to 5 seconds understanding what it is that is being offered, and then having the option to swipe up or swipe down or swipe away from it, is a big power in the hands of the consumer. And this basically gives brands a good way to differentiate from the old school brands as well. So we have seen that as a very massive trend. I mean, to add on to Sue's point, Stradivarius and Purple and Bear that use the vertical TikTok feed like format inside their apps to build up retention. That's basically a client of our partner company Storyly that does exactly this, right? So after user acquisition, once a user is inside an app, inside a shopping app, inside a branded app, right? How can the user feel that native social experience, have the option to scroll through multiple influencers within that own app, and have the option to buy from those what we call as shoppable stories, is something that has
Hmm.
been a massive trend. And using them, adding an AI layer, as Rudransh mentioned, creating a persona and boosting these creatives on Snapchat, TikTok, or any other platform, is something that the brands need to start moving towards. They've already started this shift, but it needs to be much more quicker as well. Because again, you are playing with a limited set of data. But now with these AI driven tools, you actually have the option to at least differentiate the way content is being shown out to the user as well. Along with, of course, with gamification, adding in an AR layer, as Rudransh mentioned, these kind of experience are becoming an integral part of the whole storytelling, because the
Hmm.
users are emerging with the trend as well. These days you see a lot of sustainability themes as well, users wanting to be part of the cause without being in the mix of it. Hence a lot of these brands, the e-commerce brands, or the even the airline companies these days, are actively pushing. Let's say when you buy a ticket, they're like, hey, for $5, do you want to offset your carbon footprint, for example, right? So as a
Hmm.
user, you feel that, hey, I am kind of, I'm being part of something bigger. So that storytelling of a brand, where a certain brand might make you feel good about shopping with them, where they might save paper, where they might save trees, etc. So these kind of social storytelling is something that is also on the rise, and we are seeing it to be a big part, because with the regulations in EU, with every company kind of being held accountable for their carbon footprint, trying to go green, I believe that will have an impact on the way these brands communicate it with their users, to try and differentiate themselves from their competitors and from their peers. So that is also a massive curve I believe would be a part for the coming year as well.
So we're seeing it actually go full circle in a way, because we had things like shoppable social. Now we have shoppable stories. It's about the content. The content is what drives the conversion, and the content is the creative and also the ideas behind it. So keeping an idea as our focus here, let's do a lightning round. Let's like shift and think about 2025, our ideas for 2025, our predictions for 2025. If you had one action item for staying competitive in 2025 in this highly, yeah, highly rapid change environment, always changing, everything's changing, what would it be? And I'll start with you, Sue.
I know you said one a few times, and I had a
I said
few.
one.
I think, I mean, if there's one thing that will make the biggest difference, it will be data driven personalization, because then that can span a few different avenues, whether that's, creative or the media sources that you're working with. So fundamentally, it should be data driven personalization. And outside of that, that includes things. So for e commerce, retail media is huge at the moment. Obviously, all the first party data opportunities that represents. So again, everything coming back to data driven personalization. That would be my one thing.
So in a way, we're all going to catch up with Mina in a way, Rudraj. We're all going to focus on data-driven personalization, which is huge in Mina, as we all know. But yes, an action item for marketers to stay competitive in 2025.
I think the number one thing that I feel is would be an omni-channel strategy where the
Okay.
customer feels that you're really present outside of a screen, right? It may be a retail store, or it may be a poster, or just a, a native ad that you see on a highway. I think when a customer feels that you're not only in your screen, basically wherever they're scrolling, you're also present offline. Uh,
Mhm.
they seem to have an impact, especially when you are an e-commerce store, right? And we have seen that, especially during peak sales times, be it Ramadan, be it Eid, right? So we see that omni-channel strategies have the maximum impact, rather than like just having an online approach. So I think omni-channel would be like a seamless omni-channel experience would be the number one thing for me.
Excellent. That comes at a time when, yes, we can look at CTV. We are looking at diversification. We're even looking at audio. We've had audio ads on in the series so far as well. Fahim, your prediction for 2025 action item.
I'll just combine what both Sue and Ron said as well. Is basically, a personalized, custom, omni-channel life cycle strategy, be it user acquisition, be it retention, be it kind of, putting your eggs in different baskets with your classic paid social channels, using rewarded, using games as a new placement for growing your brand, using short format of video telling, or basically be kind of, or about using something to create a gamification layer inside your app. You need to be doing it all. Back in the day, we had the option of kind of sticking on to just one strategy because that used to work for your brand. But with the way AI tools have been popping up, every brand can basically do everything without the need for kind of a big team just be lean. So that's why I believe every team should step up their game and kind of try to test out new trends. There are still a lot of brands that are still old school. They're a bit bullish on various new strategies that all the guests on the podcast just mentioned about. But yeah, if you don't take part in it, you're eventually going to lose the game in the long run.
Hmm. Well, there's a good news, bad news there, right? I mean, the good news is, guess what? Advertising marketing has a human touch. I've heard it from all of you. It has to be personalized. Hyper localized is very interesting as well, Rudransh, in your region. And maybe that's something as well to learn from. And it needs to be compelling. There's storytelling, an element in there. So we've got one to one marketing. And we have AI tools to help us. So it won't be as frustrating as it sounds. Maybe it's not as difficult. Maybe we will actually reach and achieve that goal in 2025, or at least make a good start there. And speaking of good start, I think this was a great way to start off the new year. We have your key insights, we have your experience, we even have your success stories, Raj. So I think there's a lot here. And I'd like to thank you, first of all, for coming and sharing. So, Sue, you shared also a lot, and maybe people want to continue the conversation after the show. I know I would like to. How should they get in touch with you if they want to continue?
The best way is LinkedIn. So if
Okay,
you search for, yes, Sue Azari, happy to connect and have you in my community. I post weekly industry updates every single Friday, without fail, even on my day off. So you can, yeah, connect with me there. And yeah, but thank you so much for having us. It's been a real pleasure and really insightful.
lovely, Sue. You really are the real deal, even on your day off doing that. No pressure, Rudranj. How would we connect with you?
LinkedIn as well.
Okay.
Similar to Sue, I post 3 times a week. I mostly post about performance marketing, how it's going, worldwide. So I love to connect to anyone who like to discuss performance marketing strategies, and yeah, uh, looking forward to it.
I love that. Someone who's data driven and dedicated. And Fahim, I guess they'll connect with us on the next in our series, because this is just one, many, many more to come. We're just getting started. And of course, if you're listening in, you're tuning into the podcast, you're listening, thank you for listening. If you're watching and you want to watch, well, check out the video podcast. We are on audio and video, of course. As I said, the conversation doesn't stop there. You can connect with our guests, you connect with all of us, and in the meantime, of course, subscribe to the channel on Spotify or YouTube, because that's where you'll get the most of our deep dives and what's coming up in the next series. So, yes, indeed, we're just getting started. We will continue the conversation and talk about all about apps. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
guys. Bye.